Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Business Insights. We're in September 2024. We took a little bit of a break over the summer month of August, but we're back again. And today we're talking to Charly Andrews of the Royal Bath and West Showground and Natalie Dyson from Diversity Voice. And we're covering two very connected but decidedly distinct areas of business in mental health and healthy workplace, and equality, diversity and inclusion, and actually how important that is in this day and age. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to invite Charly and Natalie to just introduce themselves, the context of where they are and what their work is, and actually what their interest in the space is. And then we've got a few questions that we'll work through, and we'll give both of them a chance to have their view on each and see where we go with it. So Natalie, do you want to go first? Do you want to just introduce yourself in the context of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thank you, Pete, for the opportunity to take part today. I'm CEO of a charity called Diversity Voice. We're based in Bridgewater, covering the whole of Somerset. We're a charity that does what it says on the tin. We're all about diversity, inclusion and equality. We work across all protected characteristics, but our bread and butter really has always been in people who don't have English as a first language. We support refugees, we support asylum seekers, displaced people generally, migrant workers who are coming in and propping up our private care home sector and our NHS. And we are also an executive partner of the award-winning Open Mental Health Alliance in Somerset. So we can signpost people to help and support across a huge wide range of organisations on the premise that there is no wrong door to accessing that help and support.
Brilliant. That's great. And a very, very important piece of work. Charly, do you want to just say hello and introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name's Charly Andrews. Thank you also for the opportunity to be involved in this. I am head of commercial sales at the Bath and West Showground, so part of the Royal Bath and West of England Society. So I've been here approximately 3 years, have a lot of background in events sales, but also performing arts and entertainment. I'm sort of here from a wellbeing mental health perspective. So we have over the last couple of years here at the Showground put a real focus on the sort of events that we want to try and attract. And we've realised that to sort of try and get more into the corporate world of events, we need to shout about our unique selling points a little bit more, which we've recognised is the fact that we've kind of got the city facilities in the countryside. So we're sort of championing bringing the two together, and within that, kind of the well-being aspect as well. We have such beautiful outdoor spaces that we're sort of trying to champion that our clients get outside during their lunch breaks and those sorts of things. Alongside of that, myself, I'm also mental health first aid trained. I've also got my own mental health experiences that I am quite passionate about being open about. So I use that sort of skill set whilst trying to manage my team and try to create an open environment, I suppose, where those things are openly talked about.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
So first question, and we'll let both of you have a go at each of the questions. Some of them will lean more one way than the other. But let's take an overview at the top. In your opinion and thinking, what elements make up a healthy and inclusive workplace? Natalie, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because we're going through this as an organisation ourselves at the moment. You know, we are, like I say, in the charity sector, money is always tight, but quite often our kind of recruitment and everything is dictated by what funding we have. But what I've realised, you know, being an organisation that cannot pay well to attract people, because let's face it, in this kind of climate, it is still all about, you know, what you bring home at the end of the month. But we are really having to look internally at, you know, why people want to stay working for us and working within the charitable sector. And key to us and to our kind of peers is that people are motivated and that they feel valued. And that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with financial reward. It's so important to us having a really culturally diverse and ethnically diverse workforce, that people actually have a sense of belonging first and foremost. And actually it is now DEIB, so diversity, equality, inclusion and belonging. And of all of them, belonging really is the most important bit and goes so much wider than kind of the protected characteristics. Because if you feel you belong somewhere, you know, you invariably feel happy.
Brilliant. And Charlie, that's going to be obviously Natalie's working very much in an advisory space in some quite challenging spaces. You're running an outward looking business, but obviously at the end of the day, it's still a very important thing. So for you, running it within the business, what does make up a health and inclusive workplace?
Yeah, to be honest, for me, it sounds quite cliche, but it is the fact that just treating people as individual people. It's the same sort of cliche line that you would use in sales, that people buy from people. It's remembering that everyone is individual, everyone has their own wants, their own needs, the sense of belonging that Natalie talks about that is so crucial, that looks different to everybody. So it's what might make one member of your team feel safe and able to open up about something that they may find difficult. That space that you provide for one person might look really different to someone else. So it's understanding those individual people and what they might need.
In the staff team, absolutely. Okay, so we've looked there a little bit at what the actual component of it is. I want to move on and sort of thinking a little bit more down the mental health road at the moment, but it will involve bit elements of inclusion as well. We know the UK economy and the worldwide, it's just a difficult place at the moment. There's lots of stuff going on, whether it be geopolitical stuff, whether it be economic stuff and cuts and all the rest of it that we all know about and read about in the media. How much do you guys find that mental health in staff teams is affected in your local environment and what you're dealing with on the ground by those bigger, wider challenges that businesses and the world in general have? And Charlie, I wonder if you want to take that one first yourself.
Yeah, well, I guess hugely for starters, it is absolutely affected. And I think it comes down to, again, what I just said, remembering that people are people. There's quite in my opinion, quite an old-fashioned approach of you leave your personal life at home when you come to work and you keep it very separate. But, you know, there must be so many times that we can all count off that we're someone in our team or someone that we work alongside or even someone more senior to us has been behaving out of character, seems stressed, potentially is making mistakes. And it's quite an old-fashioned approach to automatically tell them off in that sort of approach rather than actually pull them aside and maybe something else is going on. And I think it's remembering that those stresses that we all have in our own personal life, whether it is economy, whether it is our relationships at home or our house, something like that, it's absolutely normal that those things are going to affect how you feel and therefore how you perform. And being able to talk about those feelings will, in turn mean that you're able to perform better within your workplace. But there's also everyone's very receptive. People have much more intuition, I think, than we give everyone credit for, that they get the stress, they can feel the stress. If there's a shift in atmosphere from senior leadership, you can try and keep that away from the rest of the team as much as you can, but people can tell, people will get that feel and feel that stress. So it is just such a huge impact, I think, that it's had on everybody.
Yeah, I can very much see that. Now, Natalie, obviously you're dealing with these issues on behalf of other organizations and engagement with other organizations. So same sort of question to you. How, as you look into those organizations as an observer, as an advisor, do you see the bigger, wider world impacts having impacts on workspaces?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few kind of watershed moments, COVID-19 being an obvious one, where we're dealing with quite a number of people who've, I'd include myself in this, I'm a lawyer by qualification, and, who've had significant kind of almost like eureka moments and life-changing events based on their own like mental health experiences and experience they went through during COVID. They've made real life-changing decisions, changed careers, whatever else, retrained, learned new careers. We also have your kind of fairly high-level executive business owners who maybe didn't get the financial support that they needed during COVID, who had to resort, for example, you hear the people, pulling up in their BMWs under the cover of darkness and using sort of food bank vouchers. That mental health legacy is still very much there. People have really realized how precarious and vulnerable their situations are. And then, we hear other stories about employees who have just got so bogged down in all of the negativity on social media, mainstream media, for example, around the Ukrainian conflict, that it's invoked and provoked such a high level of anxiety around an imminent fear of attack, for example, from, Russia, that they are kind of left almost incapacitated. They're unable to do their jobs. So all of these, global situations that are going have, they still distill down to affect the individual at a really significant level.
Yes, and of course we are at the end of the day all individuals. However much we may be part of a structure and part of an organization, we may be a manager, we might be, the guy who cleans the toilets or whatever it is. We are at the end of the day individuals and human beings, and that's how that works. Which brings on, and a little bit of what you're alluding to there, the culture in the workplace is a really significant driver for many things. You've got aspects around the mental health and inclusion, around strength and vulnerability, stigmas around mental health, peer pressure to perform. These are all major issues. How do you see, as business managers and a case of managing businesses, how do you see those fit in with your day-to-day and your work? Sorry, Natalie, do you want to kick off with that one?
Yeah, and again, it's very important for us because not only are we dealing with culturally diverse clients, but we have a very kind of culturally and ethnically diverse workforce. What I would say is that different cultures have, I've seen in my experience, very different drivers. And it's almost, you need to find out all about what makes people tick as an individual and their cultural identity, and make sure that that is woven into everything that you do. And it boils down again to that sense of belonging. We do need to provide safe spaces. We can go on in a minute to talk about, the recent hate crime, and what we've done to kind of make sure our own employees felt safe. But it's beyond that. It's kind of thinking, okay, when I organise a social event, we aren't just going to go down the pub because we have people who are Muslims, so we can't have everything evolving around alcohol, for example. And in my past career as a lawyer, they would arrange golf days, for example. And when I actually looked at I'm not saying that women can't and shouldn't play golf, absolutely not, but we didn't tend to. It was the men that played golf. So we were automatically kind of excluded. So I think it is just always going above and beyond and thinking about who you're trying to include in everything you do, whether it's an event you're putting on, think about what location you're holding it in, think about what food and drink you're serving. If you have people from different religions, like for example, is the meat halal? Simple mistakes that you can make, but actually if you get it wrong, people can really feel not included.
Sorry, I was mute there. Some noise going on in the background. Charlie, what's your take? So that workplace culture and all the associated things around that with stigmas and mental health and all the rest of it. How do you're in a more, you're more immediately responsible for a specific workplace. How do you tackle that stuff?
Yeah, it's really similar though. It's the treating people as individuals again that I feel like I'm banging that same drum really, but it's what works for one person just won't necessarily work for the next. It's creating that safe space, which looks different for every person, but it's, for me personally, I found what's worked is being open about my own struggles. So I recently had to have 3 months off work because I was diagnosed with depression. And I was very open with my team. I communicated that with them. I explained what that meant. I explained that I was going to be off work, gave them as much information as I could, but was open and honest, which meant that I was sharing a vulnerability, but showing, in my opinion, that is a strength, that I'm being open about what I'm going through. This is what I need to do. And it's then created the opportunity for them to also feel that they can then be open with me in return, which, if we're not open about these sorts of things, the stigma's never going to go away, really. We have to be able to talk about it like it's a thing. It exists for so many people. So, and mental wellness looks different for everybody. Triggers are different for everybody. How people might react to a difficult situation is again different for everybody. So some places do a wellness action plan. So I've shared it with my team, and it's voluntary. If they want to do it, they can. If they don't have to. But it's something that they can just complete that says, this is generally what I find triggering at work. This is the kind of work environment that makes me feel more comfortable and more at ease. This is what it generally looks like if I'm in a bad frame of mind, for example. So someone might get extra snappy if they're stressed, whereas someone else might become quite reclusive and be very quiet. So it's sort of to learn what to look out for and what signs to look out for with each other, and then what helps them. So if you do notice that someone is being snappy and they've informed you that that is something that happens when they're feeling particular stress in some way, what then helps them? Do they want to be asked if they're okay, and do they want to go and have a chat and have some time with you, or do they need to go outside and get some fresh air? Do you need to tell them they can go home for a bit, or is actually being alone not what they need? And it's really understanding those individual needs, very much like Natalie was saying as well. It's everyone has different needs, and those needs can change. Like, just because one day I think I might need space, maybe tomorrow I don't. And it's creating that open environment where people feel that they can communicate that with you, not be told off for doing so, not be seen as weak for doing so. And it is a tricky balance to get that, because it's a new approach to a lot of people. A lot of people do still unfortunately see it as a weakness if you say that you're struggling with something. But the more that we openly discuss that and talk about it and share our own journeys, and just try to keep breaking down that stigma, really.
Yeah, so there's what I'm hearing out of that is a culture of openness and honesty, basically,
Yeah.
whatever the subject matter is, and that is important. And we all know, actually, sometimes we can even in non-mental health, even in sales and in basic language, there's always a tendency to perform and to want to say, hey, I'm the best, I'm whatever. But actually, quite apart from the healthiness of it, sometimes just going in there with an honesty and an integrity can be a lot stronger than actually trying to put masks and faces up. And that definitely applies back into the workplace, doesn't it?
I would exactly agree with that. My sales experience has shown me that the more authentic and honest you are, the more business you'll win. It's as simple as that. If someone might come to me and they're having a 5-course dinner, and then they want to also book some canapes 20 minutes before that, and it's going to cost them an awful lot more money, I will be honest and say, actually, you don't need that.
Yeah.
Where the sales side of me could be quite excited. They're going to bring us in a lot more revenue, but there's no point. I'm not going to just take money off you for the sake of it. If that is not going to be enjoyable for your guests, you don't need it. Then it's a simple example, but it's being open and honest with people, and they're more likely to trust you. So then they're going to give you more business at the end of the day.
Great cultural communication there. Love it. Love it. Listen, we're going to change track a little bit now, which probably swings a little bit more into Natalie's direct space, but I'm absolutely sure that Charlie will have some thoughts about it. So obviously over the summer, we saw quite a lot of unrest around the UK's towns, sparked by events in Southport. Clearly that's created racial tensions in society, but I'm absolutely certain that will also reflected itself into workplaces. Now, obviously, Natalie, you're dealing with a cross-cultural diverse set of workplaces and agencies dealing with workplaces. Charlie, you're dealing with a very specific workplace in a rural British Somerset County sort of setting. So there's probably two quite different thoughts, answers, and things here. But I'm interested. I'll let Natalie take this first because it is very much her space. Do you think it's had an impact in the workforce, and especially where that's a workforce with a multicultural setting? Natalie, what's your take on that?
I mean, absolutely, yes. And I can give, an example of us as a very, very small employer. We were deemed to be a high-risk organisation. We work directly at the coalface with asylum seekers, displaced people, refugees. And in particular, we go in and we work at an asylum hotel. Now, we are dealing with families. We're not dealing with single males. We are dealing with people who are at a stage in the process where their claim is bona fide, it's genuine, and it's only a matter of time before they get their visas. And there are some really quite, young people, young children, very vulnerable people in there. And of course, the hotel was potentially a target for unrest. Our staff were having to be accompanied to the hotel by police. Our welcome hubs, we had a police presence. I had check-ins with the police 5 times a week. meetings with Somerset leaders, with leaders of the local mosques, and leaders of diverse communities across Somerset. All of that was really, anxiety provoking for everybody because I was distracted. I wasn't as available. My staff, and we had, white European to Nigerian, Polish, Brazilian, many different nationalities, but they all felt threatened. Even people who've been here for, 10, 15, 20 years and who are Polish didn't want to come to work. So we put in reasonable adjustments that were, if you felt at all threatened and you could do your job at home, you stay at home, you do your job at home. And they really valued that reset and that safe space. And then we provided regular wellbeing check-ins and obviously the police presence. Now, obviously, not every organisation had to go to those lengths, and we were fortunate. We had so many partners reach out to us and say, if your staff want to come and work here, it's absolutely fine. But also being in touch with some of the mental health team at Hinkley Point, they're building huge nuclear power station. They have 9,000 people working on site, 103 different languages there and many different nationalities and ethnicities. And you've got some big burly construction folk up there, these rough, tough individuals, they felt it too. And we had the chaplain there who came and spoke to us, and people were scared getting on and off the buses, shipping them in there, that they were going to be targeted. So yeah, I say, it is all about taking what's going on in the current climate and making the reasonable adjustments that you can make to make sure that your staff feel protected and that they're not at risk.
No, that's interesting, and clearly a troubling few weeks for everybody really, but obviously on the coalface with the cultural situation for many specific people. Charlie, I mean, did you, as I joked earlier, you're there in rural Somerset on a British showground. How those events over the summer, did they have an impact at any level, or what happened? What was the feel that you were dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. You have hit the nail on the head. It sort of where we are, the rural Somerset showground. I suppose the team didn't feel a huge impact, whereas I personally live in Bristol, so my personal life did feel an impact. I cancelled personal plans, for example, when there were riots scheduled on certain evenings. A lot of my friends were affected with their sort of city centre roles. So on a personal element, where I live to where I work, it was a really different feel. But yes, the events, we have hundreds of thousands of people come through the gates across the year. And I suppose what was most noticeable for us was the police element. We were contacted by Avon and Somerset Police quite quickly, and they asked us to share the security plan for every single event we had, whether it be a 15,000 person festival or a few hundred person craft event. They wanted to see the security plan that we had for every single one. And there was quite a lot of our clients were getting on the phone to us should they be worried. They're seeing a much slower uptake of ticket sales, for example. People were just concerned to go to big events, to be amongst a lot of people. So yeah, there was those sorts of changes, I suppose. A very, very different angle, I guess, but that's the impact we've seen. And it is still ongoing in that sense. We do have higher security detail. The team have done additional training. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting perspective, and it's great with these things where we've got the two of you there from very different places to get those different perspectives. Okay, so look, let's move a little bit around towards some mental health. Culture, we've talked a lot about culture and the different cultures in workplaces. Within a workplace culture, you can have performance pressures, you can have, cultures where it's late working and early mornings and work-life balance. People have their own view about their own work-life balance, but it's certainly not always the same. The importance of taking breaks, and then the impact on all of that on productivity and mental health. Now, I'm going to lob into that as well, the different cultural situations you have. The Polish people have a reputation for working hard and long, and my wife did some well, my wife and one of my daughters were in Africa doing some work in Tanzania and Kenya for a while. And of course, you've got a very different culture about work there. So I'm wondering, when it comes to the workplaces you're familiar with, and then contextualize it in mental health, those pressures and those cultures, how do you manage those? What's your view on what the right way forward is? And is it an exclusive way forward, or is it a blend and mix, or actually how do you manage it? Charlie, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the elements I thought was quite prevalent of what you said was the hours, sort of, and that does look different to everybody. And I think that that is crucial. I don't believe it's ever going to be one size fits all for any organization, but also within the organization, each team member is different. From as as simple as if someone needs to do the school run, then hours should be flexible to be able to allow them to be able to do the school run. It's simple. But there's also this sort of risk I find with some people almost glamorizing long working hours. I feel like most people could probably think back to a time in a job somewhere that someone has almost been showing off that they were doing their emails at 11 o'clock last night, and sort of, yeah, glamorizing that feeling of how many extra hours they've had to do recently and how busy they are. And I do think there's a huge risk in that culture being created that can have such an impact on everyone else. It can then give the pressure of, oh, if I'm not logging on at 10, 11 o'clock at night, does that mean that my boss is going to think I'm not working as hard? Does that mean that I'm not as busy, so my job's at risk? People going to judge me because I'm not trying as hard? And there's a real risk. There is a real risk in that. However, if that time frame works for that person, that's different. But it's the approach that people sometimes can take and how they verbalize that, and that glamorizing element that can be risky, and I do think needs to be kept an eye on, I suppose, with how people feel. And we have certain times across the year where we're incredibly busy, but that differentiates between which department you're in. But there'll be some people that stay in the office till 7, 8 o'clock at night, whereas some that clock off at 5 because they're done. And if every time those people are saying, oh, you're leaving at 5, are you part-timer, those kind of jokey comments, that can start to have a real negative impact on people after a while. So it's important for us here that we keep a real eye on that, especially, like I say, in the events industry. Hours are so different and will change across the week, let alone across the year, of when hours need to be. So it's about bearing all of that in mind, but again, just that open communication, making sure that you're being open and everyone knows where you are. It might be that you're staying on till midnight tonight because there's a concert on, so I'm not going to start till midday. But if no one knows that, they're going to wonder where you are that morning. So it's as simple as open communication.
And as you say, in the events and hospitality entertainment, then you move into the sort of the night economy and that kind of game, and all of that applies. And it depends on start and finish and what working norms are. And I guess it does apply the same, police, fire service, ambulance, many versions of shift work. But it's actually how the perception of that comes. Can I ask a question around that as well that just struck me as you were thinking? Do you see any differential in the age and generational people? I mean, I don't know what your workforce proportion of younger and older is, and that's fine. But actually, is there a cultural shift in the understanding? Sorry, I'm using completely wrong words in this. Is there a difference in the understanding and appreciation of the need for that amongst, Gen Z and the younger ones coming through, and then the older ones? And how does that work?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt, there's definitely a difference, I would say, in the generations. I think, very broad terms, the younger generation will be clocking off and leaving at 5 o'clock. The older generation won't, and they are more likely to make a comment and think that the younger generation aren't working as hard, but they are. They just, in their opinion, they're unpaid till 5 o'clock. So they have the attitude of, I've got this really important piece of work that I need to finish tomorrow, so they will stay on to finish it if they have the passion and the drive to do so, but they're not going to stay on for the sake of it. Whereas there are some older generations that see that as slacking almost. So yes, there's a definite shift in that. For us, well, society's existed since the 1700s. Obviously, we don't have any team members that were here then, but we do have people whose family have always been involved in society in some way. So there's a lot of heritage here. There's a lot of people that are very passionate about the society, the history, and they've worked here for 20, 30 years perhaps, and they've seen the culture, the workplace culture change multiple times, have probably seen some leaders come in, try and make a change, and it's not worked, have probably had leaders that have created quite a negative workplace culture. So they can be quite hesitant to immerse themselves, I suppose, in the new, I see more positive workplace culture that we're creating, because they sort of feel like we've seen this before. So they just sort of take a step
So,
back a little bit.
so interesting. Just to, I'll let Natalie have her crack at this in a second, but actually, just then, would you say, as a very broad statement, that the younger generation coming through, and across several of the categories that people use for that at the moment, have a healthier outlook on work-life balance and mental health than their predecessors?
I think, as you say, that is a broad way of saying it, and a healthier work-life balance looks different to everyone. But I would say that, in my opinion and my experience with the millennials, Gen Z, and younger, I believe that they would put work-life balance, mental health, well-being as a much higher priority than older generations would.
Natalie, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting points there. I mean, just taking a point, the age, the generational point, you know, over time, business has really evolved. Yeah, you know, we used to send letters that would take days to arrive, and they had to be read, and then someone had to reply. We now try to cram in so much more into our working days. We're getting so much more done. But the level of expectation is still that we all work long hours. We can't do that as human beings. And I think that, you know, there is a legacy, and I inherited a legacy in my organization, you know, of if you work long hours, you're definitely working harder, and therefore should be rewarded more and better. But actually, the millennials, Gen Z, whatever, I think they do have a healthier approach. They work smart. They don't work hard in order to, you know, be recompensed and to produce the same sort of output. And whether that's working flexibly or, you know, whatever it might be, using technology, they work smarter rather than harder. And it's interesting from my own perspective, because I've moved into the charity sector from the legal sector, private law practice, you know, top 15 very corporate law firm, where, you know, and actually it doesn't matter which law firm it was, because they're all the same, you know, time is money. And if you work long hours, you make your billings targets and you make your bonuses and you rise up the greasy pole. And it was quite galling to me to be in a equality, diversity and inclusion workshop and happen to mention, you know, well, what happens to people like me? I'm a carer for two, you know, small people, two of whom have additional needs. I have my own sort of disability. I've got hearing impaired. And they just look blankly at me, and it's like, well, we can't kind of change our whole performance, you know, review and bonus structure. And I just thought, surely that's not very inclusive. So I've always been I've tried to go the other way and be like really, really fair, and to, you know, say to people, it's all about output. It's not about the hours you put in or what time you're at your desk. I don't care. You know, are we fulfilling our contracts? Is everyone happy? And what are we doing what we're meant to be doing? Are we going above and beyond? And if they're taking time off here and there, it doesn't concern me. But I have constant clashes with my operations manager, who is 64-year-old, who said she's going to retire next year, and she frequently sends emails, you know, at like 11 o'clock at night. So I'm trying to encourage her to sort of schedule the emails for 8:45 in the morning and not send them at weekends. And I'm also trying to do that myself, to lead by example. But it's not easy. You know, it's quite easy to get it wrong, actually.
No, absolutely. Yeah, interesting perspective on things. Fascinating. So just staying with that, the workplace, and the evolution that we touched on there about, you know, as we move forward through through the generations, the nature of that workplace is evolving. We were in a traditional office team environment and then pivoting more towards remote working, largely sparked and kicked into play by the pandemic, but not exclusively. Um, uh, Now some businesses are wanting to see more office-based culture coming back. How do you see the workplace, and how do you see all of that dynamic impacting mental health and inclusion in the workplace? Natalie, do you want to follow through with that one?
It's a tricky question because there's no right or wrong answer. And again, probably boils back down to the individual. Some people work far better surrounded by other people in that real kind of hubbub of an environment. They need an element of competition to drive them forwards, and or they need to hear the sales bells ringing. And other people, I include myself here. I'm very sensory, and if I've got noise around me, I'm so distracted. I do much better work when I'm in silence. Um, we've got to think about accessibility, obviously. We need to think about, hearing impaired, sight impaired. So Teams and Zoom are not for everybody. I know myself, during COVID, when I was trying to wear glasses and a mask and people were talking to me with my hearing aids, it was just impossible. And then you factor in Teams, and amongst all of that, I was just completely lost. So I think you need to make flexible working work for your organization and your workforce. Again, no one size fits all, but I think flexible, I'm right in saying flexible working now is a day one right. And you no longer have to wait for 6 months in order to submit that kind of flexible working request. And you better have a pretty good watertight reason as to why you defeat that claim. Based on business reasons. I think the presumption is always that you give the individual the benefit of the doubt and allow them that kind of flexibility.
Mm. And Charlie, you're running a very operational workplace. Obviously, they're not about to close it down and all go and work from home. It doesn't really work very well when you try to do a large event. But nonetheless, I don't doubt you've probably got people who do work more from home than they did. So how does that environment sit for the showground?
Yeah, I think it did take a while to sort of catch up in that sense. And I think for the trustees, especially to recognise that it's something that people do need to have the flexibility to be able to do. I think it's, as well as all of the accessibility reasons, there's also the fear that people had, after COVID. Quite a lot of people didn't want to go and be sat in a room with other people. They were frightened. So got to respect that. And yes, like you say, we are operational. Some of our roles are literally, we have an events operations person. So it's pretty impossible for him to do that role from home, but he does pick up his kids. He does work some weekends. His hours are flexible with the needs of the business, but also his own personal life needs. So that's our way of being inclusive for that role. But then myself, for example, I used to live an hour and a half away. So I did a couple of days a week from home to help my own mental health because I was spending so much money on petrol. Very simple things like that.
Yeah.
But it all just comes down to that trust. I think it's similar to those working hours that Natalie was saying about how I don't care if you're at your desk, if you're doing your job and you're doing it well. It's the same thing. If your job is capable to be done from home or from a shared office space, however works best for you, it's having that trust that, you're doing your job and you're doing it well. If that starts to slip, sure, but it's having that trust, and that trust doesn't then mean Zoom calling them at 5 to 5 every day to check that they're actually there and they're actually doing something. It's trusting them that they're doing their job and they're doing it well, if that's the best way that it works for them.
Yeah, brilliant. So look, we've hit 3 o'clock, and I don't want to sort of drag on, but I do want. Does anyone want to lob any questions or thoughts to that conversation around at all? Yeah, come on, Abigail. You got two of you. Wow, we're going for it. But Abigail, you go first, and then we'll follow.
Oh, do you know, I could probably chat to both of you for ages about all sorts of things that you've said and pointed out. So thank you. But the big one for me, Natalie, that you were saying was how the B had been added to EDI for the belonging section. I've not heard that before. And I think that's really poignant because it sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually brings in it's relevant to ED and I as well. And, you know, evolutionary psychology is that affinity that we're actually drawn to, that we want to have with each other. And that's part of the belonging as well. And sorry, if I can just carry on. Something that I read recently, it's called I used to work for Pearson Education, but they've been doing a long-term study. It's called the Pearson Work Skills Study, and it's linked to all different levels of work. I mean, I was looking at predominantly management skills of the future. And one of the things that they are really focusing on is, Peter and I, we spoke about this earlier, is the human skills. So it's being able to communicate, it's being able to collaborate, it's having a really good awareness of social and cultural, the environment that you work in. So what you've both been saying is so relevant to that. It's about leaders and managers having that emotional intelligence to explain to people that they don't have to work all hours and have that trust as well. So the point I'm trying to make is what both of you have been saying is so relevant to every person in every walk of life, but people forget to consider it. So fascinating. It's more my observation and feedback, but really interesting from both of you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think, you know, this thing about belonging, it is, we are all, you know, what drives us as humans is that sense of belonging to, you know, to belonging to a group, whatever the group may be. And just, you know, what I've noticed over the last couple of years is, especially around things like gender neutrality or trans rights, you know, people, when they don't understand something, they're fearful of it. So they kind of shy away from something and they kind of don't address it because they're worried about saying the wrong thing or doing something wrong. And actually, if you talk to people in those communities, they'd far rather see someone making an effort and acknowledging it, but getting it wrong. And even asking, you know, I really don't know, you know, how to address you. Please, can you help me? It's those simple things that go so far into making someone feel like they belong.
Brilliant. Siobhan, you had a question to go, and then I notice Ashish got his hand up as well. So we'll get Siobhan go first, and then we'll hear from Ashish.
Okay, so I should have explained when I introduced myself is I have a background in children and young people's mental health, working with localised CAMS and NHS to look at early intervention support for children and young people and young adults. So my question is have you seen a rise of parent mental health due to the struggles they have with their own children's mental health? Do you think that has an impact upon them in your places of work and businesses?
I can jump in straight away and say yes, definitely. We only have a team of 24 in total, and six of them are mental health first aid trained because we've taken it really seriously, and we're currently working with somebody who is going through exactly that. Their child is affected by something and it has really, really impacted them. I think, from my opinion, it's sort of two-pronged, that there is a rise, as you say, in the children's mental health, but also generationally, it's becoming more okay to talk about and to say how you're feeling. So the parents are now actually starting to come forward with things that maybe they were already feeling, but now feel that they have that safe space to do so. So yes, there's a rise, but potentially that's got at least a positive spin on it, that at least now they're able to share that more.
No, that's really good. That's really good to hear, because I used to have parents on the phone all the time.
I would echo that sentiment. And you know, particularly the families, we tend to treat families that we're dealing with, you know, asylum-seeking families as a whole unit, because invariably most, if not all of them, will have some form of PTSD, and you kind of often can't separate that. And, you know, I'll use myself as an example. You know, many years ago, in the sort of the legal world, I would never have kind of raised my head above the parapet and admitted that I suffer with anxiety and depression. I had a month off in January. I have a middle daughter who self-harms and has severe mental health issues, doesn't quite meet the CAMS bar, but we've been on self-harm courses. And that was a direct driver of, you know, some of what was going on with my own mental health. I just didn't realize it. So, as part of our Open Mental Health Alliance, we always say, it's okay not to be okay. And I've got to walk the walk and talk the talk and again, lead by example. So now I'll regale anyone who'll listen about the fact that, I wear my mental health struggles badge with pride.
Brilliant.
Can I
No,
just say on that as well? Sorry to jump in. I think it's important to remember as well that everyone has mental health. I think there's a misconception that mental health as a phrase means that you're unwell.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily. Like, mental health is something that we all have. We all have physical health, we all have mental health, but sometimes your mental health might be in a negative space. Sometimes it might be in a positive space. And I think people just hear mental health and go, no, not me, not me. But no, we've all got it. Just sometimes we're on different pathways across our mental health. And I think that's just quite an important point to remember.
excellent. Ashish, I know you wanted to chip in, so the floor is yours. Take yourself off mute, otherwise.
Well, cheers. Well, just thank you. I've really enjoyed hearing not only your breadth of wisdom, but also the specifics, the examples you shared. And thank you for sharing personally as well. That as well as the belonging that Abigail mentioned, which stood out to me as a really beautiful term to be considering within a team. There was also the nuance, the personal nature in the world of sound bites and echo chambers were around. Sometimes the nuance can be missed, and the examples you gave allowed that balanced approach. I really appreciated that. One of the, if I can share something, one of the bits I tend to look at is the underlying mechanisms by which our experiences are generated individually, so as a localized person, as well as within the context of their tribe or their unit. And understanding the mechanism has been very empowering for many of the people I meet, including children. And I wondered how, for example, one of the things about belonging that stood out to me is there are consequences to the biochemistry of belonging. Now most of us have quite high levels of tachykinins in our current environment because we're missing out on touch, which is a marker of loneliness. And that, when you have high tachykinins, it's the equivalent of smoking 20 cigarettes a day in terms of your lifelong health. So by kind of people understanding that touch is missing, we evolve differently, and how can you get it in, even mechanically yourself in a day can help shape our behaviors. But there are challenges to belonging as well, because the greater your levels of oxytocin or vasopressin, the more restricted and the more the other can seem. And that's often overlooked, in the short sound bites of, we need more oxytocin. People say, yeah, I need more love hormone, I need more oxytocin, but they'll miss out on the nuance of the other aspects. And I wondered, because you're practically guiding as leaders, and Dame Carol Black sort of demonstrated again and again, there's the leadership effect. How do you demonstrate ongoing learning amongst your tribe so that they bring in that empowered nuance themselves rather than just following you?
We have this kind of trial that we're running called Thrive, and Thrive stands for Together, Hope, Respect, Inclusion, Voices, Equality, running it as a trial. And I even suggested that we should give out some free hugs like they do in Bristol. But my team kind of overruled me on that one, and sadly we didn't go down that route. But our Thrive Cafe, it's like a wellbeing cafe, it's social. It's also a space, it could be for people who are on the periphery of belonging. So if you feel isolated, lonely, excluded, whatever it is, you just come along, and even if you want to bring a book and sit there and talk to nobody, that's completely fine. Or if you want to come and socialize, that's fine too. So we're trialing that, and it's just kind of gathering pace now. And it's just interesting to see the different people who are kind of coming through the door and what they want to do. Some people they come and they just sit with their cup of coffee and then they leave, and it's quite powerful, really. So yeah, watch this space. We'll kind of analyze where we go with that in time.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think for me, I would be really interested to talk to you more about that. I think that sounds like something that is really interesting. From us, it's been very small scale, and something that I think that we should focus on a little bit more. We've created a quiet room on site, for example, that has workplace activities, has bubbles, has breathing exercises. The colour's been chosen for the right reasons. Sort of a nice, quiet, relaxing space. We have lunchtime walks that is always at the same time every day. So if anyone wants to join that and go out to get their fresh air with other people, then do so. Obviously, you don't have to, or you don't have to talk, or you can talk. We've also at 11:11 every day. I don't know why this has become a thing, but we all get up and do some stretches from our desk at 11:11 every day. Again, you can get involved if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. So we're starting that sort of process, but it's definitely something I'd be keen to chat to both of you, actually, Natalie and Ashish, about how we could possibly be looking to get that more into our teams day to day.
Brilliant. It sounds like you sound very inspirational for your tribe, and I guess I get the sense you're receptive. They're going to be bringing their insights to you too. So wow, really, really inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of you, thank you so much. We're coming up on 3:15, and it's time, I'm sure, that we all went and did something else, but it's been very, very interesting to hear that. I would say if anybody wants to connect, or just pop your choice of connection in the chat box quickly, and I'll leave the meeting open there for anybody who wants to either make a note or save the chat. If you totally missed that one out and you can't work out what's happened, then just mail me on the email I sent you last night, and I'll connect the right people with the right people. Both Natalie and Charlie are quite heavily involved in both Somerset and South Gloucestershire. I'm saying that arbitrarily, Natalie. I might have numbered you for something you didn't want to get numbered with there. But I mean, we're dealing with these areas, mental health and EDI, EDBI or EBDI or whatever that is now. In both those shows. In fact, they are standard things that we're dealing with actually on all the shows that we have going forward. So if anybody has an interest to get involved, the certainly when we do the EDI one, it's done as a forum, which we always have some invited delegates around the table who we know who's coming for an organized chat, but it's easy also to book into and be involved with. So if you'd like to really engage that discussion at any of the shows coming up, let me know. Right, thank you for coming. Any other business, or otherwise, have a lovely afternoon. We do this on the second Wednesday each month, and I'm quite sure we'll tell you about the next one when it comes up in October. It'll just be just after Somerset. So thank you for coming, basically.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Likewise, and thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.